Well, welcome back, everyone. My name is John Euler. This is Journey to Healing, and we are doing a deep dive into the topic of boundaries because that is what is necessary if I am ever to heal from the past, heal from issues that need the ability to move through the grief and loss cycle. So the two things that will keep us stuck in the here and now are an inability to have boundaries as far as functional boundaries, task-related boundaries. So if you feel like, and let me see if I can bring our little gal up here. If you feel like this gal and you are starting to get burned out, the question is, when are you going to stop? What's preventing that? Your body is feeling that. There's a couple of things. One is in the here and now, you may find yourself at a loss or feeling it too difficult to be able to say no. Maybe you're in a situation where you can't really afford to say no. Well, that needs to be looked at a little bit. Or what's going to happen? Let me bring her up again because that's pretty telling. Right? Do you feel like this? If you're a mom, that's a recipe. It's one thing. There it is. It's one thing to do that in a gym, but it's another thing. We could actually paint words on those balls. We could put job, we could put kids, we could put relationships, we could put marriage, we could put church. Churches are horrible at giving all sorts of those additional. Can you imagine if somebody came and added a few extra? What would she be like? As a matter of fact, if we just kind of looked at her torso in an appropriate, meaning we're looking at her, we wouldn't see all the stuff going on. So, as a matter of fact, if we were just, we might even be able to talk to her, right? She could possibly carry on a conversation, but we wouldn't see all the stuff that she has going on. And a lot of you can relate to that. So the question is, what are you going to do to stop that? That's a recipe for burnout. So there are things in the here and now that will prevent that. There's also some things in the past that will prevent that. And we are looking at some of those. If you don't stop that, then certain things go on, and I'm finding out certain things will go on. And I used a film clip from a shock test from the USS Gerald Ford this past week. And this is what happens. This is the equivalent of what happens when we are around people that are triggering us. And if you look in sort of the lower left of the screen, there's a little boat. But watch what happens. Can you imagine? Okay, let's see if we can see the little boat. The dust will clear. So have you ever been around somebody? Well, we can't see it in that one. But I don't know who they paid, or maybe it is the military, but there's a boat right near there. And so what happens, that's a wonderful analogy if you've ever found yourself getting overly anxious, if you have found yourself getting depressed, if you've found yourself with compulsions, compulsive eating, if you found yourself with panic attacks. So let's say you're over at dinner. As a matter of fact, we will look at what happens with Carol Burnett here in a moment. But have you ever found that you're talking to someone and on the inside, all of a sudden it's like, I don't know what I'm feeling, but I just have to get away from that person. Or your body starts doing stuff. Your feet start, if you cross your legs and they start, one of the legs starts shaking real fast. What's going on? You're sitting on a lot of energy. Where's that energy coming from? Oftentimes there's stuff that is unfinished. And we were looking at a program, Carol Burnett, the old Carol Burnett show, that we're going to try to superimpose this. So she's at dinner, or she's having her mother over. Alcohol has just been brought out by her husband, so her husband and mama are now drinking beer, and they're playing a relatively harmless board game that should go well. Well, I'm going to try to superimpose the explosions that are going on, and eventually we're going to watch what happens.
Oh, goody, I got a man out. Not anymore, you don't. Sorry.
Well, thanks a lot, Mama. You sure didn't take advantage of landing on Ed, but you sure as shooting came after me when you could, didn't you?
Slide.
Oh, shut up!
You're just trying to take advantage of your mother's stupid move just so as I can lose the game.
And you are trying to cheat. I know where he was because I watched this board like a hawk.
All right! Let's just move him back the number of spaces that I moved him forward.
She's right.
How many spaces did you move it?
Well, how the hell should I know?
You mean you don't remember how many spaces you moved that thing just a second ago?
Well, I guess I'm just too stupid ever to grab the goddamn dice up so fast.
How the hell was I supposed to know you were going to move the wrong man?
All right. Now just stop it. I know what it was. It was a 7.
Are you sure?
It was a 7!
Well, Eunice seems to be of the opinion that it was a 7. So I will just move the yellow man back 7 spaces. Then I will move my blue man ahead 7 spaces. Landing on your green man, sending him back.
You wipe that smile off your face or I'll wipe it off for you.
I need me a nice big number now. Come on, 12. Oh, snake eyes. There go the plans I had for that man, right down the tubes.
Just like all your plans, right down the tubes.
Don't you get on my back now, Eunice. I've had lots of good plans in my time. Yeah, maybe something would work out if you just weren't always ridiculing me and making me feel like a nickel.
I have never ridiculed you in my entire life. Oh, I may not mind you being such a flop if once in a while you might show me the least bit of consideration.
Oh, really? You done pretty well by me, Eunice, don't you? Yeah, look at all the stuff you got around here by the sweat of my brow.
Name me one good thing we got in this
one good
house.
thing. I name you done. What about them new pillows or precious pillows of yours?
Pillow covers.
Oh, yeah, what about that new salad bowl? You never even used it.
Salad bowl, that's imitation wood. The wishbone dressing just eats right through it.
Well, how about that toaster, that new toaster? 4 slots.
Did you
4
hear
kind of
me?
4.
All
You got a slot for your wall.
All you ever get from me is kitchen appliances, because that's all I do around here is housework.
You'd never know it.
I spend my entire life in this 2x4 shack, taking care of those 2 kids, and then you come home from work, Ed, and what do? Look at me, Ed. What do? You sit down and you fill your stomach, and then you watch the TV, and then you fall asleep. Oh, once in a while, you might feel a little bit romantic, and that's supposed to be some big thrill for me. I practically have to get down on my hands and knees tonight to beg you to play a simple little parlor game of sorry just so I can have some fun with this impossible old woman. And then what do you do to me? You scoff at me, you jeer at me, you laugh at me, you make fun of me, you tease me, and on top of that, you take my little yellow man.
It's your move, Eunice.
It's my move. You want to see a move? How's this for a move, Ed? How's this for your move? And how's that for a move, you two?
You are really nuts, you know? Nuts? One of these days they're gonna come over here and lock you up.
Oh, lay off of me, will
You ain't
ya?
playing with a full deck, Eunice. I think somebody blew your pilot light out.
Well, hopefully my attempt at some of the technology worked. Look at how many things were going on, how many explosions, and it finally did what? It finally came out. Now that's, on the one hand, that's a fun little program. We all understand it, but it raises the question, how do we all understand that? Because so many families are like that. They tolerate that. So what happens? You have little explosions going on, but under the surface, You notice how they were starting to get more and more agitated, more and more jabs. People are becoming more and more defensive, and the alcohol didn't help. Alcohol simply allows you to speak the truth in an unreasonable fashion. If you want to try to make the case that you are not how you really are when you drink, then stop drinking. I submit to you, you are exactly who you are when you are drinking if you're an angry drunk. The truth is coming out. If you aren't, then prove me wrong by stopping the drinking. And if you say, well, I could stop drinking if I wanted to. No, you can't. Prove me wrong. Stop drinking. And you know you can't. So stop drinking for a year and then contact me. As a matter of fact, I'll have you on this program so we can talk about it after you've been sober for a year. Okay. What are the greatest hindrances to implementing boundaries? Because that little clip showed pathetic boundaries. Okay, all sorts of passive-aggressive stuff. Not so much passive, it's coming out in the open. So what are the things that are going to hinder implementing boundaries that permit that kind of emotional reactivity to continue on ad infinitum? As a matter of fact, if you have a family like that, I recommend you stop having a family like that. It's long overdue to bring truth and bring boundaries. Okay, so what are some of the greatest hindrances to implementing boundaries? A lack of certainty that the person is a genuine pig. We talked about this in the last program. How do you know? Well, there's one way to find out. Speak the truth. If they begin to humble themselves, then you know they're not a pig. If they begin to up the ante, if they begin to push back, and you deliver more truth, so you'll be able to tell that by the first couple of interactions. If somebody becomes defensive and never allows you to have a voice, if you're trying to come across in a reasonable fashion, you may in fact be dealing with a pig. If the person never apologizes. As a matter of fact, if you want a definitive list, you can go back and look at the podcast on SurvivorSupport.net under podcasts, How Big of a Pig? And also the things that will keep you from clearly seeing a pig. Those programs will help clarify whether or not you are dealing with a pig. A lack of certainty. So here's another thing that's going to hinder your ability to establish boundaries because, again, if you didn't need to establish boundaries, meaning if you were dealing with reasonable people, you probably would not be nervous right now. But if you're having to summon the courage to do this, then you're probably dealing with pigs, and that's why you're having to summon the courage. Okay, but again, what's going to hinder that? A lack of certainty that the person truly does know what they're doing. And as I mentioned before the break, they probably do. Okay, there is a school of thought that goes something like this, that, you know what, somebody can get to a point where they have been this way for so long, and they're such a profound liar. Those are going to go hand in hand, because if someone is held accountable, they'll start lying if they're a pig. So they've been this way for so long, they actually believe their own stuff. They believe their own lies. So we have to cut them a little bit of slack because they're sort of self-deluded. And the correct answer to that myth is they're not. How do you know? Because speak the truth and watch. Bring up what they're doing in a reasonable way. Bring it up. And now you've dispelled all doubt. Now they've been informed, but they know. They're just counting on you never bringing it up. So really what's happened is not so much that they have bought their own stuff, bought their own lies, but they believe you have. And thus far, you haven't said anything. So that's really the dynamic. Here's another thing that's going to hinder the implementation of boundaries. A lack of certainty that you've given them enough time, that you haven't been patient enough. You're not quite sure. So how patient do you need to be for them to get with the program? Or for you to be sure that, left to themselves, they are okay with things as they are. Meaning you need to become sure whether or not are they going to allow things to stay the same. If they are, then it's up to you to make a change. Once you're sure and beyond a shadow of a doubt that, you know what, this is intentional now, then that will help you begin to implement boundaries. How are you going to know if it's intentional on their part? You're going to begin to speak the truth and speak the truth in love, but you have to do so out of your healing rather than out of your hurt. And we touched on that in one of the previous podcasts. That's going to require everyone, if they aren't going to change and you keep your mouth shut, and that doesn't mean nagging, because that is emotional irresponsibility on your part. What this means is you're going to begin to confront. That does not mean becoming emotionally reactive. That simply means to place in front of. So you have to have done the work behind the scenes so that by the time you bring these issues up, that you are not held hostage by how they respond and you are not knocked off your square. What else is going to prevent the healthy implementation of boundaries? A lack of certainty that they truly are capable of being any other way than they are. If you're not sure that they really are capable of being any other way, then you're not going to begin to force issues in a healthy way. And the question is this: what do you need to know? We went over this extensively in How Big of a Pig in that podcast. We have listed, again, fairly extensively, the criteria of what makes someone a pig, or the checklist of how do you know beyond a shadow of a doubt you're dealing with pigs. So I recommend go back and review some of the past podcasts. But you have to be certain that they are capable. And the abbreviated version of those podcasts are simply this: if you know they can discern the difference between right and wrong, and if you know they can discern when to turn it on and when to turn it off, when it benefits, when it's going to be in their benefit, then you know. Meaning, can they stop mid-sentence if somebody walks into the room? If there's an argument that the person started, probably, on the way to church, and suddenly, right mid-sentence, as the doors open, they change up, and you watch that hypocrisy. That's by choice. That's on purpose. Someone that doesn't know what they're doing will continue to be consistent. In a previous podcast, we showed a clip of Carol Burnett and her mother, and they're doing the same kind of thing at a cemetery. And they're starting to get into it, and here comes a grieving couple walking by. They stop, and the grieving couple passes by, and they pick up, meaning Carol Burnett and Eunice and Mama pick right up once the couple has walked by. So the ability to turn it on and turn it off shows you that the person knows and the person is capable. Another thing that will hinder your ability to have boundaries is a lack of certainty that they are truly capable of being any other way than they are. Okay, kind of repeating. See, a lack of certainty that you've given them enough time, that you've been patient with them long enough, and that, again, it's kind of a little bit similar to what we just covered. Have you given them enough time? I think by now you've given them enough time, probably. And if not, time to discuss it with them and then put a time frame. And a lack of clarity on how the kids are being impacted. That's a powerful one. The question is this: do you think the kids are better off as things are? There is really a misnomer out there that kids need a mom and dad no matter what. Now, do kids need a mom and a dad? Of course. But do kids need a mom and a dad to such an extent that they are being destroyed little by little? No. As a matter of fact, the book of Proverbs is very clear what to do with a fool. So if your spouse or the parent of your child has morphed into a fool, a professional grade pig, then Proverbs 26, 27, and 28, written 3,000 years ago, will tell you what to do. One of those will tell you to cast the mocker out. Okay, a mocker is someone who is snide and just chips away at. That is a pig. And you are supposed to drive him out. meaning you somehow need to place distance between yourself and that person. And then out will go strife, out will go arguments. So it may be if the pig says he or she is not leaving, then it's time to separate, time to go get another place. If there's going to be a divorce down the road, and I'm not advocating that right away, if there's going to be a divorce, then you're going to end up separate anyways. And what will happen is if you separate from a fool, because their selfishness has been growing, their self-entitlement has been growing, now there's inertia. It's now carrying them. And no selfish person will remain decent, and especially in this day and age with the internet. So what you're going to find is if you separate, that person is going to probably go online, or they're going to meet somebody, and they're going to move on. And if they end up committing adultery, then you are free. So we're not talking about setting anybody up to do that. We're simply saying this: you do not benefit, and your kids do not benefit from living in a tension-filled home, because you will find that you will reap the whirlwind. You will end up with kids who don't want to talk to you, and you're the good parent. They won't want to talk to you. Why? Because they will feel as though you abandoned them and you never stood up for yourself and you never stood up for them. So it's ironic, almost seems counterintuitive, but you already see it in their faces that they are becoming discouraged, they're becoming depressed. That is the time now to step up. And better do it sooner rather than later, because the damage is being done day by day. So they are being impacted. Do not wait. Do it methodically. Do it don't do it overnight unless there's physical abuse. Then you need an escape plan and you need to get away. Do not stay if there's physical violence whatsoever. And ladies, if a man puts his hand on your throat, and other places, but in this day and age, bizarre things are happening. If they lay their hand on you in anything other than love, you need to separate from them, because it can be very dangerous very quickly. Okay. And one other thing that will hinder your ability to have boundaries is a lack of clarity as to what is being granted as far as biblical permission to begin to make radical changes and implement significant boundaries. That's for a certain segment of the listening population. If you have a church-going background, and I just kind of spoke to this, there is additional pressure sometimes to remain with the offending spouse. That is tradition. That is not God's directive to you. God's directive to you is to be able to discern whether or not someone has become a pig, whether someone has morphed into a profound degree of selfishness, to where now the words of Jesus actually applies. Do not, in Matthew chapter 7, verse 6, do not cast your pearls before swine. So you have to be able to discern who you're dealing with, because if you continue to interact with someone that has morphed into a professional grade selfish pig, you are not spiritual any longer. So you can also give yourself permission, because you are free. You're free to begin to implement those boundaries and think of implementing things such as separation. So begin to think in those terms. Your kids need you to protect them. Here's going to be another thing that's going to hinder your ability to implement boundaries, which is a lack of clarity of the difference between guilt and shame. Most people that have a difficult time implementing boundaries are what's called shame-based, that they feel guilty for everything. They are like Velcro when it comes to little guilt lint. So they just attract all this stuff, and they can't discern whether or not it's true guilt or false guilt. And the way to discern that is simply this. Genuine guilt is always associated with and tied to something that you have specifically done. A behavior, an action, a word. Okay, it's something that you have done. Therefore, you can take steps to make it right. 1 John 1:9, a really powerful verse. It says this: if we confess our sins, then he, God, if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just to forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. That is a conditional verse. And the word confess means to say the exact same thing as. So, when it comes to me and myself, if I know I've done something wrong, how do I know? Because my conscience will tell me. If I've done something specific, it will come to mind, and then it's up to me to go make that right. I need to go and speak to that issue with the person that I've negatively impacted. But if there's nothing that's coming to mind, but I feel guilty, I just walk around feeling guilty, that's actually false guilt, or what's called shame. Shame can cause me to stay stuck, and there's nothing I can do about it because I didn't do anything to bring it on. So the difference between guilt and shame is this. Guilt is something that you did, therefore you can do something about it. Shame is owning somebody else's responsibility for them doing something wrong. Well, we're going to pick it up at this point next time as we do an additional, a little bit deeper dive into, again, what are some of the things that will keep us stuck when it comes to implementing boundaries. So be sure to join us next time on Journey to Healing.
You've been listening to Journey to Healing, sponsored by SurvivorSupport.net. We trust you've been helped by the information our host, John Euler, has shared. To donate to this ministry, schedule a personal consultation with John, or to arrange a professional training for your church or organization with John, simply visit our website. On behalf of Survivor Support, we look forward to hearing from you and to have you join us next time on Journey to Healing.